Hi, this is Sergeant Betsy Brandner Smith with the National Police Association, and this is the National Police Association podcast. I have today, of course, one of my rare repeat guests, but I'm starting to think I need to have Travis Yates on regularly because he really has his hand in everything when it comes to law enforcement, not just officer safety, but also politically, from a leadership perspective. And as we know, there's so much happening in the United States when it comes to law enforcement concerns, which of course concern everybody. So we have something really interesting to talk about today. So Travis Yates, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Betsy. It's great to be on my favorite person's show.
So I live in Arizona, and I'm about 2 hours from the city of Phoenix, and the Phoenix Police Department is an agency really near and dear to my heart. It's one of the largest agencies in the country, and they've been under a federal consent decree that we're going to talk about in a minute. But to start with, Travis, I'm going to ask you the question I ask every cop. Why did you get involved in police work?
Well, my father, the easy answer would be my father was a 27-year veteran law enforcement, retired as a captain at Fort Smith, Arkansas. And so I grew up around him and his friends. As a kid, I didn't need Superman. I had my dad's friends, and I just thought these guys were gods, right? But ironically, I wasn't interested in going into the profession. I was in athletics, and one of my dad's good friends was a prosecutor, and I thought he was just everything there was to being a person, a great person. And so I was beating around the idea of going into coaching or maybe law school and things like that. But then at the age of 19, I guess you could say I made a fatal mistake, Betsy. I went on a police ride along. And it's not the typical ride along that I know you and I have done for hundreds of people where, a lot of paperwork. You're lucky if you get a couple of interesting things. This was like a ride along episode of Cops. Like everything you can think of happened. And I can remember looking at the guy about halfway through the ride along, and I said, "Man, do they pay you for this?" And he was like, "Twice a month, man." And I said, "This is it. This is it." So that's what directed my attention. I changed my degree, and I was at the college at the time. I changed my degree, and as soon as I hit 21, man, I couldn't get to it fast enough. And then you blink, 30 years later, I retired from the career. That's how it happened.
And that is so true. It goes so fast.
Yeah.
You and I both, never had the same day twice. And I don't think a lot of people in a lot of professions can say that. Now, while you were in law enforcement, you rose up through the ranks, ultimately held a leader, high leadership position. And but kind of parallel to your law enforcement career, you got involved in training, and you got involved in writing and video and ultimately media. Talk about what you're doing now.
Well, yeah, I kind of fell into all that. I was running our EVOC program at the department, and we were having some successes, and people started reaching out and asking me questions and asking me to come train them. And I didn't even know that was a thing. And at some point I did it. And at some point I started writing articles about it. At some point it started getting picked up by people. Next thing you know, I've been on the road for 25 plus years training, and I still do consulting and writing some expert case work. And that's really what I do now. I do a lot of training on the road. I consult with agencies, and we just culminated a huge project with consulting with the Phoenix Police Union, Phoenix Police Law Enforcement Association, where they were under a DOJ investigation. They reached out to me about 18 months ago. And of course, I was aware of the DOJ investigations in the local law enforcement and the consent decrees, because if you just look at it from a critical eye, you go, this doesn't seem like it's working. They stay in the federal government runs these agencies for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and these cities get worse. No one listening is going on vacation in a consent decree city ran by the DOJ, New Orleans, Seattle, Portland. I could go Chicago. I could go on and on, right? And I'm like, but the DOJ is claiming success, and these agencies are getting worse, and the communities are getting worse. And so I think we all suspected something wasn't right. But the problem was, Betsy, is the DOJ would never take this evidence to court. They always sort of pressured these agencies to settle and to agree to all this bureaucracy. And so nobody got to look under the hood, so to speak, of what was actually going on. And 18 months ago, when Phoenix contacted me, I sort of saw an opportunity to get under the hood. Wasn't sure we could, but we started started informing the public through media and through other channels of what this has done to other cities. It's not my opinion. You can look at the data for the last 30 years. They've been investigating agencies since 1994. The 94 crime bill gave the attorney general the authority to investigate and run, if necessary, local law enforcement. Now, there's a constitutional issue with that, Betsy. The 10th Amendment prohibits the federal government from getting involved in local matters. But that's not a constitutional issue if the local government agrees to it, which is what has occurred for 30 plus years. And so it always bothered me that they make these outlandish allegations, but they never have to prove it in a court of law. They never have to actually show the evidence. And it always bothered me that these agencies would just say, okay, without saying, can you show us what is actually going on here? And so Phoenix 18 months ago decided we're going to maybe make them show us this. This is very destructive. Very fortunate that a lot of the leaders in the city of Phoenix was on board with that. And by the way, it wasn't controversial. When the DOJ culminated their investigation, the city leaders knew what the past had been. In the past, the DOJ would not show any of the leaders the investigation. They would just pressure them to sign in for a consent decree, which is what creates obviously the chaos. And when I say chaos, I don't even mention the money. It costs on average $10 million a year for these cities to operate under the federal government's authority. I mean, Seattle is 20 years in, $200 million later, and no one's going to Seattle anytime soon. I can guarantee you that with what they've caused in that city.
So talk about that. Why, first of all, why is this so expensive? It would seem that if the federal government comes in with permission to an agency to take a look at how things are working, are there problems? Usually it's because there are problems with how they're dealing with certain communities or use of force issues, things like that. Why would it cost millions of dollars, Travis?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. First off, what the DOJ demands, it's everything from training to technology to a bunch of bureaucracy. So there's extra costs there. But secondarily, it's all the staff the DOJ brings along. They use outside consultants, many of them attorneys from Washington, D.C. They have federal consent decree monitors that essentially run the department, and their salaries start at $1 million a year. They will rent office space in that city. The Phoenix monitor, he hadn't been to his office in over 2 years. The guy that was running Maricopa County, because they were under consent decree. So they were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, the department, on his office space, and he hadn't been there in 2 years. And then, of course, the consent decree monitors write 4 reports a year, a quarterly report to the federal judge about progress. And their salaries start at $1 million a year. So there's a whole other aspect of this where there's a lot of money being given to outside consultants that are connected to the Department of Justice. Many of them are former DOJ employees, and the cities are on the hook for it. They have to pay for it. In the case of Phoenix, they actually have paid over $10 million just to help the DOJ investigate their own department, and they're not even under a consent decree. So, yeah, it's a pretty ugly thing when you look into it. The downside is it's kind of a complicated issue, so most people don't talk about it. They just let it go and let it happen. And most police leaders aren't talking about it because guess who's giving them grant money every year, Betsy? The Department of Justice. And so it's pretty ugly when you look at it. I feel a little bit dirty. I know too much about it, so I take a couple showers a day, but that's why.
So this type of investigation, if you will, comes from the federal government to a local law enforcement agency. And you brought this up. This really is a constitutional issue, isn't it? Because and I don't think a lot of people know this or understand it. Law enforcement in the United States is decentralized for a reason. This is our Constitution allows for local law enforcement because we, the voters, get to elect our mayor who picks our police chief, or our sheriff who chooses what kind of sheriff's department we're going to have. Same with we elect our governor who decides what kind of state police we're going to have. And then, the federal law enforcement, the federal government has its own law enforcement. They have over 100 of their own agencies. How does the federal government come into a city, let's talk about Phoenix for a minute, and say, we're going to investigate you, you're going to pay for it, and you're going to agree to it? How does that happen?
Well, there's only one way it can happen because clearly there's a constitutional violation there if it's forced on it. The only way it can happen is if that department goes, okay, we'll do it, we'll comply, and we will pay for it. This is why the DOJ's only one agency in 30 years has taken them to court, and the DOJ ran back to Washington, D.C. This is why it can't go to court because it's a constitutional issue. This is why they have to get agreement, and this is why their summary investigations are so damning on the department because it's designed to put pressure on the department to do something because public opinion is swayed. It won't shock you that the media can't get enough of this. They love these reports because they get to run these sensational headlines, and so it's really a racket. And what a department ought to do if the federal government does this is say, that's fine, investigate us all you want, but we're not helping. Go to a federal judge, prove your case, get a subpoena for our records. We'll comply with that. Because if they have the evidence, they should be able to do that. But up until now, that's not how it's worked. These departments and these weak, cowardly leaders have just said, okay. And it's also very political, Betsy. They don't go into Republican-led cities, right? Historically, you've seen Republican administrations have shied away from this because they understand the Constitution. It's really odd that in a time we know this term threat to democracy. This is actually the threat to democracy of every citizen with the federal government running local law enforcement, but nobody wants to talk about that. And so over the last 30 years, this has ebbed and flowed. Republican administrations, they kind of pull back on this. Trump pulls back on it completely in his last term, and he's pulled back completely on this term. But then Democrats come in and they pick it back up, but they only pick and choose traditionally Democratic-led cities. Why? Simpatico, right? They all get along. They all agree to it. Everybody's hands in the cookie jar. Everybody wants to play nice because of politics. So, but anytime politics gets involved, investigations wane, accuracy is dismissed, and like we saw in Phoenix, complete lies and myths occur.
So let's talk about Phoenix. Why was the Phoenix Police Department being investigated in the first place?
Well, the city asked the DOJ, and the DOJ wouldn't tell them. So nobody to this date knows. I personally, it's just my opinion. I think that the ultimate goal of this, and people will say it's conspiracy theory, but I don't know how you say it's not. The ultimate goal of the federal government is to take over local law enforcement, right? And so I think that the Biden administration saw an easy city. Hey, Phoenix has a Democratic mayor. They have a Democratic city council. The city is kind of a swing city. Sometimes it votes Democrat. So I think they saw us as easy pickings. Let's just pick them off, right? Because once they had them, they got them for 20, 30 years. And so it was just another chink in the armor, but they didn't expect a few courageous men and women to rise up in that organization and to question them. And once they got questioned, it was kind of on at that point. And let me tell you what the city council did, Betsy. When the investigation got done, the DOJ went to the city council and they said, what we found was bad. It's just really bad. Bunch of racist, a bunch of discriminatory behavior, patterns and practices, which they won't even tell you what that definition is, by the way. And so the city council, because they were prepped by the union and prepped by the information they were given, they asked one simple question. Okay, will you show us what you found? Show us the investigation. Keeping in mind, the city council had authorized over $10 million to do this. And the DOJ said no. They said, no, if you will sign up for a consent decree, we will then show you. Well, who signs a dotted line on a contract without reading the contract? Well, every city before Phoenix did it, but Phoenix kind of stood firm, and they asked them twice over the course of a year, no, show us what you have, show us the evidence, and then we will consider it, because we want a good department as well. We believe in accountability as well. And that's important, Betsy. We all believe in accountability. This is just a broken system, right? That's what we've exposed. The DOJ said no again, and they released a summary report that just was the most horrific thing. That's all you read about the Phoenix Police Department. It was the most horrific thing you've ever read. They listed 132 incidents. And by the way, keep in mind, the time period they investigated Phoenix was 6 years. During that time period, Phoenix responded to 5 million calls and arrested approximately 300,000 people. So to prove a pattern in practice, the DOJ listed 132 of those incidents. Here's the police activity they said that made it a pattern in practice. 0.00025% of the police activity, they said, makes you a reason why we need to come in and take over this department. And so, but what happened next had never happened before. The Phoenix Police Department, at the push of the council that was turned down for the information, said, we don't know what like these summary reports, DOJ, it's very vague. I mean, they'll say things like the Phoenix police responded to a man that was having a mental episode and they used unconstitutional force. Period. They don't give any details, right? That's how they're able to get away with this deception. And so what the city of Phoenix did, and everybody can go see this, is right off the Phoenix police website. They put a public website up that listed exactly what the DOJ said on the left, and on the right, the same incident. They listed the body camera footage and all the reports. That's what gave me an opportunity last summer to go through every single incident and to analyze what the DOJ said versus what actually happened. And I got to tell you, I am not proud of what I found. It's sickening of what I found. It's disturbing of what I found. It's the epitome of a threat to democracy that one of the most powerful entities in the land did what they did to the city of Phoenix.
So I want to talk about that because again, locally, I live in the Tucson, Arizona area. So locally, this was kind of a big deal in the media, and yet I know Phoenix PD to be a very professional, well-educated police department. They have been innovative for
Yep.
the 40 years that they have been on my radar as a trainer and then as a Arizona resident. And when I read those vague summaries of what the DOJ found, I frankly, I just didn't believe it.
Right.
Talk about what you found and what they were putting out there.
Well, ultimately, what I found is 97% of the time the DOJ deceived in their report. 90, and sometimes it wasn't just deception; it was an outright lie. 97% of the time. Now, frankly, that's unbelievable. Like I told somebody the other day, I wish it was only 50% because people see 97% and they go, "This can't be true." But no, you can go yourself, watch the video, and then see what the DOJ said. It was completely. I mean, there were some times when I went through these cases, Betsy, I didn't think I was looking at the right case. That's how off the narrative was in what the DOJ said. And if you want to deceive the public, here's how you do it with law enforcement. As you know, Betsy, law enforcement is judged based on totality of circumstances, right? You have to know all the information to be able to judge the incident or call. And so what the DOJ would do 97% of the time is they would say things like, the police were speaking to a juvenile, and the juvenile was being compliant, and they just pushed his head in the ground and handcuffed him. Well, when you watch the video, you see, well, he wasn't compliant at all. Like he was fighting officers, he was running away from officers, and they did this in virtually every single one. And there were some, as you said, the Phoenix is professional. There were some cases where you watch it, you go, that's textbook. I got to put that in my class. This tactics in this, I mean, it was just insane, Betsy. I'll talk about one real quickly because they're all insane. But the police got a call that a man was holding a baby hostage with a knife. So the police show up. The wife basically says, her girlfriend says, yeah, he's back there in the back where the baby is. He's got a knife. He's threatening to kill the baby, blah, 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 blah. And so the police pop the door open. They shoot pepper ball rounds at him, kind of distract him, and they rush him, tackle him, get him handcuffed, and hold the baby, and everybody's happy. And it was just an incredible act of courage and a tactical plan. The DOJ said that was unconstitutional. They put the baby at risk and blah, blah. I mean, it was insane. They took these cases that anybody with a brain would look at and go, man, that's some heroic stuff. And they made it seem like they were doing something wrong. And the only reason I can think they would have done this is just like in the last 30 years, they didn't expect anybody to know it. They didn't expect it to go to court. They didn't expect me to look at it. They didn't expect the Phoenix police to put out a website showing the details. They flat out did it intentionally, knowing no one else will know this, because how this works, Betsy, is when you sign up for a consent decree, all that goes away. They look to the future. So whatever that report said, all the falsehoods, if Phoenix would have signed that consent decree, that would have been gone, and they would have been moving forward to destroy that city. And so every city that's gone under this in the last 30 years should be taking a critical look, because I don't think the DOJ just started with Phoenix and lied 97% of the time. This has started way back. And I got to tell you, it's really disturbing, Betsy. If you and I would have lied 10% of the time in a police report and took somebody to jail, we'd be in prison right now. It's the epitome of what we hold each other accountable for is you have to be truthful in police investigations. And this was an investigation, if you could call it that. By the way, you don't know who did it. They don't list their investigators. They don't list the experts they use. It's just this vague report. And the Phoenix local media, they're just as guilty. They've been complicit. This website was up for them to see as well. They didn't look at it. In fact, I put a preliminary report last summer. When I saw the use of force, the first 36 incidents were use of force, and every one of them I found was a fraud, every one of them. So I thought that was important enough for the politicians to know that. So I put that preliminary report out. And once again, the media can go look at the same videos I looked at. Oh, they didn't do that, Betsy. They just talked bad on me. I'm some controversial figure. I'm this, I'm that. I'm like, well, that tells you they have nothing to talk about, right? You can talk about me all you want. And here's why they can talk about me, Betsy, because my name's on the report. We can't talk about who did the DOJ report because they're anonymous. But the media there in Phoenix, for the most part, they've propped this report up like it was something sent from God. And this is why the Phoenix Police Department needs to be, they have to do this, they have to do that. They should be ashamed of themselves because the media should hold power accountable. And one of the most powerful entities in the land has been going through these cities for 30 years and absolutely destroying them. And the media hasn't said a peep.
So what is the fix for this? And I know that Phoenix is going to be the model for how we're going to take this on in the future. I know, you've got Congress involved, local legislation as well. Our congressman up there, Abe Hamadeh, who ran on being pro-law enforcement, he is getting involved. How do you unwind decades of this kind of potential fraud and abuse?
Well, President Trump started it today, actually, as we're recording this. This is on the 21st of May, and he stopped everything in Minneapolis. He stopped everything in Phoenix. And what they said was because they don't trust the report. That even they looked at it, and I'm not going to. I mean, my report's out there, but I'm not sure they've seen that. But even they looked at it and said, yeah, something's not right in these investigations. So they've pulled back. But see, that's not good enough, Betsy. They've pulled back in the past. Trump pulled back in his first administration. George Bush pulled back significantly in his administration because it just comes right back. This was codified in law in the 1994 crime bill. So the only fix is you have to get rid of it. You can't, it's so broken. You can't, like if a police department lied 97% of the time, nobody would go, we can fix that department. No, they would say you have to disband that department and start new. So you have to start new. Now we need police accountability. Civil rights violations are important. And by the way, you mentioned the federal government. Well, what would the DOJ do if they don't get to do this anymore? Well, here's a little tip. Guess who's immune from civil rights violations? Federal law enforcement. So I would say not make them immune. They should be held to the same accountability as local law enforcement. And the DOJ can investigate their own backyard. What needs to occur, and Phoenix has a great model that they have presented to some congressmen there in the Arizona area, and I believe in it wholeheartedly because it complies with the Constitution. We should all want to do that, and we should want to hold officers accountable, is to take that funding the DOJ has been just abusing for 30 years and send that to every state attorney general and have them rise up at their own team to look at local law enforcement. They should be doing that anyway, but the federal government can support that by using what they've been doing here. And what that does, it does two things, Betsy. Since 1994, the DOJ has implemented 41 consent decrees. Okay, so, I don't know, it's 4 or 5 a year, maybe. My math may be off. But so are they really holding law enforcement accountable, right? I mean, they're picking and choosing certain departments. We don't know why. But if you empower all state attorney generals across 50 states to do the same thing, you're going to get more accountability. You're going to get more common sense accountability. Yeah, California may do it different than Texas, but that's the way the Constitution's set up. Local by states. That's the way it should be. We have a bill ready to go. We need Congress to do the right thing. I know President Trump will do the right thing. I think he has a proclivity to send things back to the state because the irony about President Trump is they keep saying he's a threat to democracy. Well, he keeps wanting to send things to the states, which is what democracy is. And so I will not rest, and many people will not rest until this is eliminated in its current form. And by the way, that has not been done. President Trump can do whatever he wants through executive order. It's still codified in law. And I would say to any congressman, Democrat or Republican, this is not a partisan issue. You cannot continue to destroy cities and lie about local law enforcement. I would love for them to try to defend the 97% failure rate that I just discovered in Phoenix. And by the way, You don't want me going to these other cities and looking, because I bet I'm going to find something very similar. And that may be my next step.
I think that's extraordinary. And I think that's what's going to need to happen. You're peeling back the layers. You're doing it rapidly. I know it's time consuming, but I think what you've done is really break open this issue for people to see that not only should the federal government not be involved in this, but it's really not helping the safety of the community.
No.
It's not helping people's civil rights. It's really doing nothing except it seems like enriching some individuals who are involved in this.
Well, Betsy, it's so crazy. Roland Fryer is a Harvard professor. I'm sure you're familiar with him. He's an African-American gentleman, an esteemed economist. He did a peer-reviewed study that said more African-Americans are dying because of consent decrees. It's created that much more violence. And I'll give you just something so silly. The DOJ just wrapped up a 10+ year consent decree in Albuquerque. They did it right before Trump came in, right? Well, this is their success. They claim success, but nobody wants to remember why the DOJ came to Albuquerque. They claim because they had shot and killed 20 people in 3 years, we have to come in here and fix your department. Well, they leave out the details of those shootings because every one of those shootings was justified. Well, guess what the last 3 years was in Albuquerque? Not 20, 30. So all the metrics they say is a success actually gets worse. Crime's up 60% in Albuquerque. Their department's at the lowest staffing ever. Their budget has exploded. So they make these cities worse. So it's not like we're talking about a system that can be fixed or can do the right thing. It has to be eliminated there, sent to the states. And then I think everyone's going to like that, because you're going to get honest accountability at that point for the most part.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Travis, where can people find out more about your work, read about what you're doing, and find out more about you?
Well, I'm going to give you the link to this full report, Betsy, so you can put it in your show notes. But if they go to travisyates.org and just hit my article button, at the very top of that article will be the articles about the consent decrees. You can go and search. I've written a bunch of articles on this, but I really encourage people to read the full report. It's going to take you a little bit of time. See what I saw, and then go to the website yourself and start watching some of these videos. It should make your blood boil if you're an American. Now, if you want to keep your head in the sand and believe that the federal government, the DOJ, is your friend, go right ahead. But I don't think there's any defending this. And by the way, it's not just me. There's been a lot of great men and women in the city of Phoenix that have really decided we can't let this happen. They cared about their city. They knew what would happen to their city. And they've done some tremendous work. So I'm very, very grateful that I even got an opportunity to participate.
Travis, thanks so much for taking on this topic, and thanks so much for spending time with us today. And if you'd like more information about the National Police Association, you can visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Every day, the brave men and women of law enforcement put their lives on the line to keep us safe. But they need our help to continue their mission. Activist politicians, progressive prosecutors, the ACLU, and the rest of the anti-police forces receive millions in donations from extremist pro-criminal elements like George Soros and woke corporations. The National Police Association is fighting them in courts around the country, including the United States Supreme Court, defending officers who are being attacked for doing their jobs. Additionally, the National Police Association works year-round to pass tough-on-crime legislation to put and keep criminals behind bars. Consider going to nationalpolice.org and donating to keep us in the fight. Together we can win. That is nationalpolice.org.